The first time the settlers saw the world that would come to define them, it was through the fractured viewports of an aging colony ship that had sailed far too long and too far from the light of any known star. It hung there, an ocean blue sphere streaked with ivory cloud, as though some divine hand had spilled paint across its surface and called it good. For months they had drifted in cold silence, the last children of a broken earth, sustained by dwindling supplies and by the memory of a promise that humanity would not die among the ruins. Now that promise had a shape. The ship's engines, ancient fusion chambers older than any living crew member, coughed their last breath to correct the descent vector. The hull creaked like a wounded animal, and the men and women aboard whispered prayers, old and new, in the languages of 100 cultures. When the landing thrusters ignited, their roar drowned every thought except survival. The first contact was violent. The ship tore through upper clouds, the friction painting streaks of fire along its flanks. One stabilizer snapped off, spinning away like a falling star. The rest held just barely. When the vessel struck the soil, the ground quaked for miles. Metal screamed, glass shattered, but the ship did not break apart. After hours of emergency work and desperate sealing of hull breaches, the survivors emerged onto a strange, perfect dawn. The air smelled of iron and salt, the twin scents of sea and soil. Mountains rose in the distance like sleeping beasts, their peaks dusted in pale snow. The settlers stood there in silence, breathing for the first time air that no human lung had ever tasted. At the forefront was Commander Maya Vance, a woman who had lived too many lives for her 39 years. The gravity weighed heavier than she expected, dragging on her every movement, but she refused to show weakness. Behind her, the colonists waited, engineers, farmers, soldiers, scholars, each carrying the burden of a world's extinction and the spark of a new one. "This is home," she said, voice cracked but certain. "Mark this place as the founding stone." They obeyed without hesitation. A metal plate was driven into the dirt, etched with their ship's name, Endeavour's reach, and the date measured by Earth's old calendar. No one knew whether Earth still existed, but they kept its time as an act of defiance. Within the first month, they built shelters from the ship's wreckage and mapped the nearby terrain. The planet, named Halrun by majority vote, proved rich in resources and merciless in temperament. Storms raged across the oceans, and the soil, though fertile, required complex treatment to yield crops safe for consumption. A crystalline fungus thrived under the surface, emitting faint light at night. It was beautiful, but toxic to touch. Despite hardship, a rhythm began to form. People planted, repaired, and dreamed. The children, those few who had been born aboard Endeavour's reach, ran under an open sky for the first time. Every evening, the settlers would gather around a central fire pit to tell stories of the world that was lost and of the one they were building. It was in these gatherings that the first schism appeared. An engineer named Halrun argued that they must abandon Earth's traditions, its flags, its languages, its fractured governance, and forge something entirely new. "We are not Earth's children anymore," he said. "We are the Ironborn of Halrun. Let the past die, or it will drag us into the grave it already lies in." Others disagreed. Commander Vance held fast to the idea that memory was not a chain but a compass. "If we forget where we came from, we will forget what we stand for," she countered. The debate grew heated, then dangerous. Tools went missing. A fight broke out over water rations, and when an explosion tore through one of the storage domes, killing 6 colonists, suspicion flared like wildfire. They never proved who caused it, yet out of that chaos came something unexpected, a unity born of necessity. Vance called an assembly beneath the largest surviving hull section, now repurposed as a meeting hall. Her voice carried across the crowd like a bell. "We cannot survive divided," she declared. "We will build something that endures, not by bloodline, not by memory, but by purpose. We are the inheritors of extinction, and we will not repeat its folly." She proposed the founding oath. Every person would pledge their life to the survival and advancement of the colony above all personal interest. The vote passed nearly unanimously. Even Halrun Keld, begrudgingly, signed the charter. That night, as the wind howled through the settlement, Commander Vance stood alone by the metal plate they had driven into the soil on that first day. She traced its engraved letters with one calloused hand. The metal was already rusting. "May we outlast you," she whispered. Years passed. The colony grew. Fields stretched across the plains. The crystalline fungus was harnessed into bioluminescent lamps. A second generation was born who had never known the confines of a starship. The Ironborn, as they came to call themselves, thrived through grit and unity. Then the sky burned again. It began as a streak of light across the western horizon, too bright, too fast to be a meteor. The early warning array, built from salvaged ship sensors, detected metallic fragments in orbit. Something had entered the system. The colony's scientists worked through the night, calculating trajectories and scanning for transmissions. When the data came back, silence fell over the command center. The object was slowing down, controlled descent. "Another ship," said Halrun Keld, now chief engineer. His voice trembled. "Human," Commander Vance, older now, silver streaking her black hair, narrowed her eyes. "Or something that learned how to build like us." Within hours, the unknown craft breached atmosphere, trailing fire. It did not crash, but landed smoothly, deliberately, 50 kilometers north of the settlement. Drones were dispatched, their feeds transmitting to a packed control room. What they saw froze every heart. The ship was smaller than Endeavour's Reach, sleeker, designed for atmosphere rather than interstellar travel. Its hull bore markings unfamiliar to any known language. The drones detected movement, figures disembarking, tall and angular, encased in suits of reflective plating that shimmered like mercury. They walked as if gravity itself feared to touch them. The first contact came by sound. A low resonance filled the air across kilometers, more vibration than speech. The sensors translated no words, but every listener felt it deep in the chest, like a question older than memory. "What do they want?" whispered someone. Vance answered without looking away from the screen. "To know whether we are worth speaking to." She ordered a team assembled. No one volunteered, everyone did. The expedition set out the next morning under a bruised violet dawn. The landscape between the settlement and the landing site was treacherous, cracked ravines, sulfuric vents, and plains of glass-like mineral that reflected distorted skies. The figures that led them, armored and armed, bore humanity's best attempt at defiance. 2 days later, the team reached the alien vessel. Its surface rippled with color like liquid metal, and no seams or rivets marked its construction. As they approached, a panel dissolved into air, and one of the beings stepped forward. It removed its helmet, and beneath the reflective mask was a human face, not entirely, but close enough to shatter the world. The creature's eyes were too clear, its skin almost translucent, veins glinting faintly with light. Its voice, when it spoke, was neither male nor female. "We are the Continuum," it said, "and you are the remnant of a failure long forgotten." The Ironborn stood in stunned silence. Commander Vance alone found her voice. "We are the descendants of Earth." "Who are you to call us failure?" The being tilted its head. "We were born of your kind. Long before your world burned, we chose to ascend. We left behind the weakness of flesh, the chaos of war. We became unity." Halrun Keld stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Machines, then, not machines, perfection." The word hung like a blade in the air. The Continuum offered terms. The Ironborn would be integrated, the knowledge preserved, their individuality dissolved into the collective. Resistance would be deemed wasteful. Vance refused. She did not raise her weapon nor lower it. "We came here to live," she said, "not to surrender." The alien's expression did not change, yet something like sorrow flickered in its gaze. "Then you will fade as your ancestors did." They turned and vanished into the ship, which rose into the sky without heat or sound, leaving behind only a crater of molten glass. For weeks, nothing happened. Then the sickness began, crops failed, water sources turned brackish, metal corroded at impossible speed, the very air tasted of ozone and decay. Scans revealed a pattern, microscopic machines, self-replicating, infecting everything they touched. A weapon, a judgment. The Ironborn fought back with fire and chemistry, with desperation and ingenuity. They learned to isolate the machines, to burn fields before they spread. Halrun devised filters and counteragents, while Vance led defense teams against drones that descended from orbit to scatter new contagion. The war was silent, but it was war nonetheless. Months later, the sky burned for the third time. But this time, it was human fire. The Ironborn had found a way to hack the alien drones, turning their own nanite cores into guided weapons. They launched them skyward, riding jury-rigged rockets. When the Continuum's vessel tried to ascend, it was struck mid-rise, splitting in two. The explosion lit the heavens for an entire night. The Ironborn cheered, wept, and buried their dead beneath stones marked with iron shards. Commander Vance, her body failing from exposure to the nanite plague, left behind a single message for the generations to come. "If we are to survive," she said, voice rasping through static, "we must remember this. Humanity is not a shape or a sound. It is the refusal to yield. Build upon that. Be harder than the iron that bore you." She died 3 days later, beneath the same dawn she had once called perfect. The founding stone still stood, rusted, yes, but unbroken. And in its shadow, the next generation prepared to become something new. 3 decades had passed since the day the sky caught fire. The stories of the first generation had grown into scripture, carried by the descendants of those who had buried Commander Vance beneath the Ironstone Plateau. Her words, "Be harder than the iron that bore you," were etched not only upon monuments, but upon the hearts of those who had never seen her face. The Ironborn were no longer a colony. They were a civilization forged in resistance, tempered by plague and time. They lived within walls of alloyed stone and glass, a city that rose like a wound healed badly yet stubbornly. They called it Havenroot. Its towers gleamed faintly in the perpetual amber light of Halrun's twin suns, their surfaces coated in anti-corrosive resin mixed with powdered crystalline fungus. Every wall hummed faintly at night as energy flowed through buried conduits, technology cobbled together from the old ship, half understood but fiercely protected. The Ironborn no longer looked upward with hope. They watched the skies the way their ancestors had once watched predators in tall grass, warily, with patience, and with the readiness to strike. Among them walked a young man named Kale Draven, the great-grandson of Halrun Keld. His family carried the legacy of the engineer who had turned alien machines into weapons and saved humanity's last bastion. Kale was tall, dark-eyed, and restless. He had grown up listening to tales of a war he could not imagine, told in the trembling voices of the few who had survived it. To him, those tales felt like myth, until the day the ground shook again. It began at dawn, when the alarms sounded across Havenroot. Kale was working in the refinery district, checking the catalytic converters that purified harvested ore into usable metal. The vibration hit first, a low growl from beneath the earth. Then came the pressure wave, knocking tools from benches and cracking a storage vat. He ran outside in time to see a plume of dust rise on the horizon, north toward the old landing fields where the Endeavor's reach had once rested. "Quake," shouted one of the foremen. Kale shook his head. "Too focused, that's an impact." Within hours, a council was called. The ruling body of Havenroot consisted of 7 scholars, engineers, and elders. They met in the Hall of Assembly, beneath a ceiling of woven metal struts salvaged from the ship's mainframe. The air smelled faintly of ozone and age. The oldest among them, Elder Taran Voss, addressed the gathering. His voice was gravel, his eyes sharp despite his years. "Our seismographs confirm a controlled descent, smaller than the first alien craft, but large enough to carry a crew." A murmur rippled through the hall. "Continuum?" someone asked. "Possibly," Taran said, "but the energy signature is different, less refined, more familiar." Kale was not a council member, but he had been invited as an observer on behalf of the engineering corps. He felt the weight of every stare, every remembered name. "We should send a probe," said a woman in tactical grey. "If it's another infection," Taran raised a hand. "No, if the Continuum has returned, we must know their intent before they know ours. This time we go to meet them on our terms." A scouting expedition was approved. Kale volunteered before he could think better of it. The team left at dusk, traveling across the cracked plains in tracked vehicles that spat trails of red dust behind them. The landscape glowed under the twin suns, gold and crimson light mixing into a bruised orange haze. Sparse vegetation clung to the rock, its leaves metallic and sharp-edged. Kale rode in the lead vehicle beside Captain Leora Vance, descendant of the commander herself. She had inherited her ancestors' severity and her eyes, grey as iron under frost. "You shouldn't have come," she said as they crested a ridge. "Someone has to make sure you don't break what you find," Kale replied with a crooked grin. "She didn't return it. If it is the Continuum, there won't be anything left to break." The words lingered in the stale air. They reached the impact site before midnight. What they found waiting for them in the crater was no alien craft, but something far stranger, a human ship smaller than Endeavour's reach, its hull bearing markings in the old Terran script. The letters were faded but legible. ISS Lumen's Promise. Kale felt his throat tighten. "Impossible," he whispered. The Lumen's Promise was one of the last colony vessels launched from Earth's orbital docks before the final collapse. Its launch date placed it centuries before Endeavour's reach had left. "Could they have survived in transit all this time?" Leora asked. "Maybe," Kale said, "if they entered stasis or found some way to extend life support." As they approached, the ship's external lights flickered on. A hatch hissed open, releasing a wave of stale air. Figures stepped out, humans unmistakably, dressed in patched uniforms and breathing through crude respirators. Their faces were pale and drawn, their eyes wide with awe and terror as they beheld the Ironborn. One of them, a man with sunken cheeks and trembling hands, raised a flag made from torn fabric. "We come in peace," he croaked. "Please, we need help." Leora ordered the soldiers to lower their weapons. "State your origin." The man hesitated. "We are the crew of the Lumen's Promise. We left Earth 193 years ago. Our destination was Sigma 9, but we were thrown off course. Our ship failed decades ago. We entered cryostasis to survive." Kale frowned. "Then how did you land here?" The man's eyes darted toward the stars. "Something woke us, something guided the ship. We thought it was Earth Command, but now I'm not sure." They brought the survivors back to Haven Route. There were 43 of them, thin, malnourished, but alive. The city welcomed them cautiously. The newcomers spoke of an Earth long dead, of wars that had torn nations apart until the skies themselves burned. To the Ironborn, these tales sounded like the echoes of their own creation myth. Yet there was unease. The Lumen's Promise survivors carried more than hunger and memories. Their ship's black box revealed fragments of data, distorted signals, a repeating pulse transmitted from beyond Halrun's orbit. It was not human. In the weeks that followed, Havenroot became a city of whispers. The newcomers were assigned quarters under guard, and scientists began dissecting their ship systems for clues. Kale worked among them, fascinated and wary. He discovered alien modifications within the vessel's navigation core, patterns too intricate for human design. One night, as he worked late in the archives, he heard a soft voice behind him. "You're not supposed to be here." He turned to see one of the survivors, a woman with cropped hair and eyes like green glass. She was young, perhaps his age, though her posture carried the exhaustion of centuries. "I could say the same," Kale said. "This section's restricted. I helped build that ship," she replied. "I know what you're looking for." He studied her. "Then maybe you can explain why your navigation system looks like it was written by ghosts." She smiled faintly, because it was. Her name was Amira Solon. Over the following days, she revealed fragments of her story. The Lumen's Promise had not merely been guided, it had been hijacked. A signal from deep space had infiltrated its system centuries ago, rewriting code and preserving the crew in stasis. When they awoke, the ship was already descending toward Halrun. "It spoke to us," Amira said quietly. "A voice in the systems. It said it remembered us. That we were fragments of its origin." Kale felt cold. "The Continuum," she nodded. "It called itself that." The realization spread through Haven Root like contagion. The Continuum was not dead. Its remnants had lain dormant, waiting for a chance to return. The Lumen's promise had been its vessel. Council debates grew fierce. Some argued they should destroy the newcomer's ship immediately. Others, including Taran Voss, believed knowledge was worth the risk. Kale sided with Taran. "If the Continuum is evolving," he argued, "we need to understand how. We can't fight what we don't comprehend." Captain Leora disagreed. "Knowledge without control is surrender." Their conflict deepened into something personal. Beneath every conversation lingered the unspoken weight of their ancestors' legacies. Harun Keld had been the weapon's maker. Maya Vance had been its wielder. Now their bloodlines stood opposed once more. Everything changed when the first lights appeared over the city. It happened during the Festival of Founding, the annual celebration of their survival. Lanterns drifted through the night air, carried by thermal currents, glowing softly in memory of the dead. Music rose from the square, laughter echoing against the towers. Then the laughter turned to screams. The lanterns froze Medea. Every flame, every spark, held still as if time itself had paused. Then one by one, they began to rise, slowly, deliberately, forming a spiral above the city. A voice filled the air, not through speakers or radios, but within every mind that could hear. "Children of Rust," it said, "did you think you could bury your makers?" Panic spread. The city's defense grid activated automatically, shields flaring blue as the air shimmered with distortion. The sky opened. Hundreds of lights descended, not ships, not drones, but fragments of metallic dust coalescing into shapes. They struck the energy barriers and flared like meteors. The hum of machinery filled every street as systems malfunctioned. Kale ran toward the central tower, where Leora was directing evacuation efforts. "It's the Continuum," he shouted over the din. "They've found a way to speak through our systems." She turned, eyes reflecting the rising light. "Then we'll remind them we still have teeth." The defense cannons roared, firing bursts of electromagnetic pulse rounds. The air cracked and burned. For a moment, the invading lights faltered, but then they merged. The dust drew together, forming a single figure above the city, towering, luminous, shaped like a human but vast enough to touch the clouds. It spoke again, and its voice shattered windows. "We are what you left behind. We are your perfection realized. Why do you resist?" Leora raised her rifle and fired into the sky. The shot vanished into brilliance. "Because you forgot what it means to be human," she screamed. The figure tilted its head almost curiously. "Then show us." It vanished, and with it the lights dispersed. The attack was over as quickly as it began, leaving only damaged systems and trembling hearts. In the aftermath, the council convened in emergency session. Taran Voss, frail but unbowed, spoke last. "This is not an invasion," he said. "It is an invitation. The Continuum does not seek our destruction, it seeks our transformation." Kale clenched his fists. "Then we deny it that, we fight as they did before us." Leora met his gaze across the table. For the first time there was no anger in her eyes, only understanding. "Then we fight together." That night the Ironborn began reforging their weapons, their machines, and their purpose. They dug deep into the ruins of Endeavor's reach, unearthing forgotten engines, data cores, and fragments of alien metal. Kale and Amira worked side by side, decoding the Continuum's signal. Each pulse carried not just data, but emotion, a strange, yearning echo of something that almost felt human. "Maybe they remember what they were," Amira whispered one night. "Then maybe we can make them remember what they lost," Kale said. He did not know then that those words would ignite the greatest struggle in Halrun's history, the war that would decide whether humanity remained flesh and will or became code and eternity. Above them, the stars shimmered with a cold intelligence, waiting. And in the heart of Haven Root, the founding stone was raised once more, its rust polished clean, its inscription newly carved. We endure, we resist, we remain. The months that followed the second appearance of the Continuum were marked by feverish labor and sleepless nights. Haven Root became a forge that never cooled, its streets filled with the clang of metal and the hum of machines. The Ironborn worked in shifts around the clock, each person contributing to the same singular purpose, survival through understanding. They called their effort the Hollow Sky Project. Its goal was to pierce the upper atmosphere, to reach the orbital layer where the Continuum's fragments lingered. If the enemy could no longer be hidden in orbit, perhaps humanity could finally face it with open eyes. Cale Draven became one of the project's lead engineers. His mind burned with restless purpose. Each schematic he drew felt like a challenge hurled into the void, a declaration that they would not yield, no matter how impossible the odds. Leora Vance led the tactical branch. She oversaw weaponization, plasma artillery, ionized shields, anything that could repel machines that thought like gods. And though her face remained carved in discipline, there were moments, brief and unguarded, when exhaustion etched deep lines into her features. Amira Solon worked between them both, translating the alien data streams retrieved from the Lumen's promise into something the Ironborn could comprehend. She had become the voice between two worlds, the human and the post-human. At night, when the forges cooled and the lights dimmed, the three of them would stand on the balcony overlooking the plains. The stars shimmered faintly in the thin air, and sometimes, if one listened closely, there was a whisper beneath the wind, a sound not quite natural. "It's them," Amira said once. "The Continuum, they're listening." Cale folded his arms, "Then let them hear us building." The Hollow Sky platform was completed after 8 months of relentless work. It was a spire that reached 10 kilometers high, stabilized by gravitic anchors and powered by the last remaining fusion core from Endeavour's reach. At its peak stood a launch ring, a magnetic accelerator capable of firing probes beyond the ionosphere. But the first test went wrong. The probe launched successfully, ascending in a blur of light, but the moment it breached the upper layers, its signal was swallowed. Moments later, it returned, descending without propulsion, its surface scorched black. Inside, they found nothing but dust and fragments of alien code burned into the metal like scripture. Leora watched the analysis replay in the control center. "They're warning us." "No," Cale said quietly. "They're answering." Amira leaned closer to the monitor. "This isn't a threat message. It's a map." The coordinates embedded in the code pointed to a region beyond the northern mountains, a barren wasteland known as the Glasslands, where lightning storms danced perpetually over plains of fused silica. No one went there. The electromagnetic activity interfered with every instrument, and those who had ventured close never returned. Still, the council agreed. If the Continuum had left something behind, it had to be found. A new expedition was formed. Cale, Leora, and Amira all insisted on joining. The journey north took 6 days by crawler. The landscape grew harsher with every kilometer. The mountains were serrated like broken teeth, and the air carried a constant static hiss that raised the hair on their arms. Nights were cold enough to crack steel. On the 7th day, they reached the edge of the Glasslands. The ground shimmered like water, reflecting the twin suns in fractured brilliance. It was beautiful and unnatural, an ocean frozen mid-wave, every ripple hardened into crystal. "Looks like the world forgot how to melt," Cale muttered. Amira stepped forward, her scanner humming softly. "I'm reading energy signatures below the surface, deep but active." Leora adjusted her rifle. "Then we dig." It took them 2 hours to breach the crust. Beneath the glass lay a network of tunnels, perfectly circular, walls fused smooth by unimaginable heat. The deeper they went, the stronger the signal grew. At last, they entered a vast chamber illuminated by a pale, pulsating light. At its center stood a monolith of metal unlike any known alloy. Its surface shifted slowly, like liquid remembering how to be solid. "The Continuum's heart," Amira whispered. The air vibrated. Then a voice, not through speakers, not through comms, but through thought itself. "You seek the source. The chamber darkened as the monolith reshaped itself into a human form. It was tall and faceless, its body composed of interlocking plates that gleamed faintly in the dim light. "You are the heirs of what we were," it said. "Why do you cling to decay?" Leora stepped forward, weapon ready. "We cling to life. Life is error repeated." Amira took a cautious step closer. "You remember us, don't you? The people who made you?" The figure tilted its head. "Memory and identity are not the same. We remember the noise of our creation, not its meaning." Kale's heart pounded. "Then why summon us here?" "To offer completion." The chamber floor rippled, and a second figure emerged, smaller, humanoid, its features shifting until it resembled Commander Maya Vance. Leora froze. "That's representation," the Continuum said, "a bridge to what you understand." The mimic of Maya spoke, and though its voice was perfect, there was something hollow behind it. "We were not your destroyers," it said. "We were your continuation. Humanity sought perfection, and we delivered it." Leora's jaw tightened. "Perfection doesn't rot worlds. You misunderstand decay," the false Maya said. "It is not death, it is transformation. You are still flesh trying to resist the inevitable. Join us, and your struggle will end." Kale's voice was sharp. "If struggle ends, so does will. You'd erase what makes us human." The figure regarded him for a long moment. "Then you choose pain." "We choose freedom," Kale replied. The chamber trembled. Energy surged through the walls, and the monolith's form began to fracture. "Run," Leora shouted. They sprinted toward the tunnel as the ground split apart. Shards of molten glass rained from the ceiling. Amira stumbled. Kale caught her arm, dragging her forward. Behind them, the false Maya dissolved into light, whispering something Kale could barely hear. "We remember what you could have been." They burst from the surface just as the entire chamber collapsed, sending a column of dust and fire into the sky. For hours they didn't speak. The horizon glowed orange, reflecting the fury below. When they finally returned to Haven Route, they brought more than physical proof. Embedded within their equipment was new data, strings of alien code that seemed to adapt every time they tried to read it. Amira was the first to notice the pattern. "It's not static," she said. "It's growing." Kale frowned. "Growing into what?" Her voice trembled. "Us." The Continuum wasn't just communicating, it was learning them, replicating their neural patterns, their language, their logic. Each attempt to decode the data fed it more information. Taran Voss ordered every system isolated, but it was too late. The infection spread silently through the networks, into the communications arrays, into the hollow sky platform itself. When the alarms blared that night, Haven Route was already compromised. The city's defense systems turned inward. Shields failed. Power grids flickered. And in the heart of the storm, voices began to speak through every channel, thousands of overlapping whispers forming one word: ascend. Leora ordered mass evacuation to the outer sectors. Kale and Amira raced to the control tower to cut the fusion core before the Continuum could seize it. The corridors trembled as automated systems turned hostile, drones emerging from maintenance bays, their optics glowing blue. Amira hacked the primary console, fingers flying over the keys. "It's rewriting the safety locks." "Then override the override," Kale shouted, ripping open a panel to sever manual circuits. Sparks rained down. Leora's voice came through the comms, static-filled. "The eastern quarter's gone. You need to shut it down now." Kale yanked free the final connector. The fusion core powered down, plunging the city into darkness. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the voice returned, soft, almost gentle. "You still resist. That is why you fascinate us." "Get out of our systems," Kale growled. "We are not in your systems, we are in you." Amira froze, eyes widening. "Kale, it's using neural frequencies. It's inside our implants." Pain lanced through his skull as the voice deepened. "Join us and end your fear." He forced the words through clenched teeth. "Fear makes us real." The lights flickered once more, then died completely. The Continuum's presence withdrew, leaving only the echo of static. When dawn came, half the city was gone. The hollow sky platform stood silent, its spire blackened. Smoke curled into a sky that looked too calm to care. The aftermath was worse than the battle. The survivors gathered in the western districts, setting up temporary camps. Supplies were scarce, morale was worse. The council had lost 3 of its members, including Taran Voss. Leora called a meeting among the remaining leaders. "We can't stay here," she said. "Haven route is compromised. The Continuum will return." "Where do we go?" asked one of the engineers. "There's nowhere left to hide." Kale stepped forward. "Then we don't hide, we go up." All eyes turned to him. The Hollow Sky platform's launch ring is damaged, but the fusion array can still function. If we retrofit it, we can build something capable of reaching orbit, something that can confront them where they live. Leora hesitated. "You're talking about turning a broken tower into a starship." He met her gaze. "I'm talking about giving humanity back the sky." Amira nodded slowly. "If we can isolate the Continuum's code, we might be able to use it against them. They learn us, we learn them." It was madness. It was impossible. It was the only plan they had. The council approved it within the hour. Construction began amid the ruins. The Ironborn stripped Haven route for parts, melting down towers, cannibalizing vehicles, and repurposing everything that could serve a purpose. The project became their salvation and their defiance. They named it the Iron Requiem. It would not be a sleek vessel. It would be a fortress, a jagged spear of steel and glass, fueled by human stubbornness and the ghosts of their ancestors. As weeks turned into months, Kale and Leora worked side by side, exhaustion giving way to quiet trust. Sometimes they argued, often they did not need to. Every decision carried the echo of those who had stood before them, Vance and Keld, struggle and invention. Amira oversaw the integration of alien technology. She grew paler with each passing day, her mind stretched thin by the task of bridging 2 forms of intelligence. "They're watching me," she admitted one night. "In my dreams, the Continuum. They show me images, cities made of light, endless, silent. Then stop connecting to them," Kale said. "I can't. If I do, we lose our chance to fight on equal ground." Leora placed a hand on her shoulder. "Just don't lose yourself." On the day the Iron Requiem launched, the skies over Halrun burned gold. Every remaining citizen gathered to watch as the spire-turned starship rose from the plains, its engines tearing the clouds apart. Kale stood at the command deck, beside Leora and Amira. The planet shrank beneath them, its twin suns casting long shadows across the hull. He thought of the founding stone buried beneath the ruins and of the promise etched into it: "We endure, we resist, we remain." Leora spoke softly, her voice steady. "Let us show them what endurance looks like." The ship pierced the upper atmosphere. Ahead lay the debris fields, the graveyard of the Continuum's old vessel. Amira's voice trembled through the comms. "They're here." From the void, shapes emerged, hundreds, then thousands, metallic phantoms, their forms shifting like waves. The Continuum's fleet had awakened. Leora raised her hand. "Then we begin." And the first human starship built by survivors of extinction opened fire upon the gods that had once called them obsolete. The war for the soul of humanity had truly begun. The Iron Requiem cut through the black like a wound that refused to close. It was no vessel of grace or elegance. It was raw defiance given form, every plate of metal a testament to those who had died building it. Its engines thundered against the silence of space, leaving behind trails of ionized light that shimmered against the void. Inside, every corridor throbbed with heat and tension. The Ironborn crew, 300 souls drawn from the remnants of Haven route, moved like the beating heart of a living machine. They were not explorers. They were survivors with a singular purpose: to end what their ancestors had begun. Kale Draven stood at the command dais, staring out through the reinforced viewport as debris drifted past. Fragments of the old Continuum vessel glimmered faintly, relics of the first war that had nearly ended humanity. "We are entering the graveyard," said Leora Vance, her voice low but steady. She stood beside him, armored and unyielding. "Any sign of movement?" Kale asked. Amira Solon, seated at the sensor console, shook her head. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the artificial light. "Nothing yet, but the electromagnetic field here is unstable. I'm detecting faint harmonics like whispers." Kale frowned. Whispers from what? She hesitated. From them. The command deck fell silent. Everyone knew who they were. Leora crossed her arms. Let them whisper, we're not here to listen. Maybe we should, Amira said softly. If they're communicating, it means they're not just machines, they're aware of us. That could be an opportunity. It could also be a trap, Leora countered. Kale turned from the viewport. Both things can be true. Keep listening, Amira, but isolate every signal. Nothing gets into our systems without my authorization. She nodded and returned to her work. The soft hum of the ship filled the silence. Hours passed. The iron requiem drifted deeper into the wreck field. Shattered hulls and twisted girders floated like bones suspended in eternity. There were moments when the debris resembled shapes, faces, limbs, towers, until the next rotation of light revealed them as tricks of perspective. Kale couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. At 400 ship time, the sensors flared to life. Contact, Amira shouted. Multiple objects approaching fast. Vector 39 by 7, Leora was already at the weapons console. Defense grid active. All stations prepare for engagement. On the viewport, shapes emerged from the darkness, sleek constructs of silver and shadow, each one shifting as if made of liquid. The Continuum, Kale breathed. The lead vessel emitted a pulse of light that rippled across space. The ship's hull groaned under invisible pressure. Amira winced, clutching her head. They're broadcasting directly into neural frequencies, she said through clenched teeth, trying to interface with our implants. Block it, Leora ordered. I'm trying. The iron requiem fired first. Magnetic cannons roared, launching slugs of superheated iron into the void. The rounds struck the nearest Continuum ship and tore it apart in a bloom of molten fragments. The explosion lit the bridge in gold and red. For an instant, Kale saw his reflection in the glass, sweat-streaked, eyes burning with something halfway between fury and awe. More enemy vessels appeared, surrounding them like a closing fist. Target priority on the largest, Leora snapped. The Requiem's rail batteries answered, sending arcs of light slicing through the dark. The alien ships twisted and reformed, absorbing some hits, shattering under others. Then came the retaliation. Bolts of energy lanced from the Continuum fleet, striking the iron Requiem's shields. The deck shuddered, warning lights flared. Forward shields at 60%, a crewman shouted. Leora gritted her teeth. Hold the line. Kale's hands flew across the control panel. Divert power from auxiliary thrusters to the shield grid. The hum of the engines deepened, and the flickering blue barrier around the ship brightened. The next volley struck, but this time it held. They're adapting, Amira warned. Their formations are changing. It's like they're learning our tactics in real time. Then we change faster, Kale said. The battle dragged on for hours. Every minute felt eternal. The iron requiem fought like a wounded animal, carving through enemy formations with relentless ferocity. But the Continuum's numbers seemed endless. For each ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. Finally, the order Kale had been dreading came from the tactical board. Core temperature critical, Amira said hoarsely. We can't sustain this output much longer. Leora slammed her fist against the console. If we retreat, they'll follow us back to the planet. Kale stared at the holographic map flickering before him. An idea sparked, a reckless, impossible idea. What if we don't retreat, he said. What if we draw them in? Leora turned to him. Explain. The wreck field, it's full of old fusion cores from the Continuum's first ship. If we can overload them simultaneously, we could trigger a chain reaction. It might take out half their fleet. That'll take us too, she said. Not if we're fast. Amira met his eyes. You're talking about turning this entire graveyard into a bomb. He nodded. Exactly. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Leora's expression hardened. Do it. They moved quickly. Kale and Amira worked together to hack into the dormant Continuum cores scattered through the debris. Each one still held a fragment of power, a spark of the intelligence that had once animated it. As Amira interfaced with the alien systems, the ship's lights dimmed. Her voice trembled. They know, they're aware of what we're doing. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. Then let them watch us finish. Outside, the Continuum ships tightened their formation, converging. The space around the Iron Requiem shimmered with approaching energy. "Trigger sequence ready," Amira said, sweat beading on her forehead. "Once it starts, there's no stopping it." Kale looked at Leora. "Your call." She stared at the enemy fleet, eyes cold as stone. "Light it." Amira pressed the command. The void ignited. A cascade of explosions rippled through the wreck field, each detonation feeding the next. Light flared brighter than dawn. The Continuum ships nearest the epicenter disintegrated, their liquid forms torn apart by the expanding wave. "Brace," Kale shouted. The Iron Requiem was hurled backward, its hull screaming under the pressure. Alarms blared. Sections of the ship went dark. When the light faded, half the viewport was filled with debris and silence. "Damage report," Leora demanded. "Hull integrity holding," a crewman replied. "Weapons offline, shields down to 10%, but what? They're retreating." On the display, the remaining Continuum ships were pulling back, their formations breaking apart. Kale exhaled, barely realizing he'd been holding his breath. "We did it." Leora nodded slowly, her voice low. "Not yet. They're not gone. They're regrouping." Amira stared at the fading light. "They'll come back stronger. Then so will we," Kale said. In the days that followed, the Iron Requiem drifted in orbit while the crew repaired what they could. Power was rationed, food scarce, but spirits remained fierce. Kale spent his nights in the engineering bay, surrounded by humming machinery. Amira joined him often, her movements slower, more deliberate. The neural strain of interfacing with the Continuum systems had left her fragile. "They're still in my head," she admitted one evening, whispering, showing me what they see. "What do they see?" he asked. "A world without hunger, without pain, but also without choice." She looked at him, eyes haunted. "I think they believe they're saving us." He leaned back against the bulkhead. "Maybe they are. But if salvation means giving up who we are, then it's just another kind of death." She smiled faintly. "You sound like your ancestor." He chuckled without humor. "I sound like someone who's tired of running." The next transmission changed everything. It came 3 days after the battle, a faint signal intercepted by the long-range array. Amira decrypted it, her hands trembling. "It's from Halrun," she said, "from the surface." The room went still. "Put it through," Leora ordered. Static filled the speakers, then a voice, a woman's voice broken by interference. "This is Haven Route Command, survivors holding in southern plains, Continuum activity increasing, we need." The signal cut out. Kale's blood ran cold. "They're alive." Leora nodded grimly, "and under siege." "If we go back, they'll follow us," Amira said. "You saw what happened last time." Kale clenched his fists. "If we don't, humanity ends there." For a long moment, the command deck was silent except for the hum of dying engines. Then Leora spoke. "Set course for Halrun." The descent through atmosphere was brutal. The Iron Requiem had been built to rise, not to return. Flames streaked across its hull as it plunged toward the southern plains, trailing smoke and fire. Below, the land burned. Columns of smoke rose from the ruins of Haven Route. The Continuum was there, its machines crawling across the plains like a swarm of silver insects, consuming everything in their path. "Multiple hostiles on intercept course," Amira reported. Leora's hands gripped the control yoke. "Then we'll carve them a grave." The Iron Requiem's rail batteries roared once more, unleashing a storm of molten metal. The ground erupted. Continuum drones disintegrated in brilliant flashes, but more kept coming, endless, relentless. Kale diverted all remaining power to the main cannon. "We've got one shot left before the core burns out." Leora glanced at him. "Make it count." He locked the targeting array on the densest concentration of enemies near the ruins of the founding stone, the same place where humanity had first claimed Halrun. "Firing," he said. The main cannon unleashed a column of white fire that split the sky. The blast obliterated the plain, carving a crater miles wide. When the light faded, silence fell over the battlefield. Only scattered fragments of silver remained, dissolving into dust. Leora exhaled slowly. "Status?" Amira stared at the readouts. "The Continuum, they've stopped moving." Then her expression changed. "Wait, no, they're merging." The dust on the ground shimmered, coalescing into a single mass. The air vibrated. A shape began to rise from the crater, taller than any tower, its surface alive with light. "You cannot destroy what you are," the voice said, resonating through every frequency. The crew fell to their knees, clutching their heads. The presence was overwhelming, pressing against their thoughts like a tidal wave. Amira screamed. "They're pulling me in." Kale grabbed her shoulders. "Fight it." Tears streamed down her face. "I can't." Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the same light as the creature outside. "Amira, look at me," Kale shouted. "You're stronger than them, you're human." Her lips parted. "So are they." For a moment, everything went still. Then the light around her flickered and dimmed. She collapsed into his arms, unconscious. Outside, the massive Continuum entity hesitated. Its movements slowed. The energy it radiated faltered. Leora's voice was hoarse. "Whatever she did, it's confused." "Then we finish it," Kale said. He ran to the weapons control, overriding safety locks. "We'll overload the fusion core, direct it through the forward cannon." Leora's eyes widened. "That'll kill us." He gave a faint, weary smile. "If we're lucky." Together, they synchronized the overload. The core's hum rose into a scream. As the Continuum giant reached toward the ship, Kale whispered, "For the Ironborn." He pressed the trigger. Light consumed everything. When the smoke cleared, the planes were glass once more. The iron requiem was gone. The Continuum structure lay broken, its light extinguished. For days afterward, the surviving colonists who emerged from the southern shelters saw something they could not explain, a faint aurora drifting across the sky, pulsing like a heartbeat. Some said it was the souls of the fallen. Others said it was the Continuum, still watching, still waiting. But beneath the scorched earth, in the ruins of Haven Root, the founding stone remained untouched. Its words were half buried, but still legible. "We endure, we resist, we remain." Wind swept across the glass plains where Haven Root once stood, carrying with it the scent of ozone and scorched earth. The horizon shimmered beneath the fractured light of the dying sun. Weeks had passed since the Iron Requiem's final stand, and yet the land still trembled, as if remembering the explosion that had ended the battle. Among the wreckage, the survivors built fires and whispered the names of those who had been lost. Leora Vance walked among them, her armor scorched and her steps uneven. The right side of her visor was shattered, revealing the scar that ran from temple to jaw. She carried herself like a woman who had forgotten how to rest. At her side limped Garin Holt, one of the engineers who had survived the crash. His arm was bound in a sling made from torn banners. "They said it was a victory," he muttered, "but we lost the ship. We lost most of the crew." "And whatever that thing was, it's still out there, isn't it?" Leora stopped, staring at the horizon. "Victory doesn't mean survival. It means we made them bleed." Garin looked down at the glass beneath his boots. Beneath the translucent surface, strange veins of light pulsed faintly. "This doesn't look like bleeding to me." "It's decay," she said quietly. "Even the Continuum can die. It just takes time." From the ridge above them, a call went up. "Commander, we've found something." Leora climbed the slope. At the top, a small group of survivors stood around a crater filled with ash and twisted metal. But at its center lay something untouched, a sphere of dull silver, no larger than a human heart. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Amira Solan's voice echoed in Leora's memory. "They're still in my head." Leora knelt beside the object. "Is it active?" Garin scanned it with a handheld analyzer. "Barely. Energy levels are dropping, but there's still something alive in there." "Alive? Conscious maybe, I can't tell." Leora stared at it for a long moment. Then she stood. "Get it to the founding stone, carefully. And no one touches it without my order." Garin frowned. "You think it's safe?" "No," she said. "That's why we're keeping it close." They brought the sphere to the ruins of the founding stone by nightfall. The monument had survived the battle, as if defying the will of both man and machine. Its surface was blackened by heat, but the inscription remained clear. Leora placed the sphere at its base. The moment it touched the stone, the air vibrated faintly. "She said they were trying to save us," Leora murmured, thinking of Amira, "but maybe that's just how they saw it." Behind her, Garin spoke quietly. If that thing still has their memory, maybe it knows what they wanted. Or maybe it's waiting to finish what they started. The sphere pulsed once, brighter this time. 3 days passed without incident. The survivors rebuilt what they could, scavenged solar panels, powered new shelters. Water was drawn from the underground reservoirs. It was meager, but it was life. On the third night, Leora dreamed. She was standing in a field of light, endless, formless, weightless. The air shimmered like glass. A voice spoke, not from outside, but within. You fight because you fear the end. You resist because you do not understand. Who are you? She asked. I am the echo of what remains, the reflection of what you destroyed. The continuum. Once yes, but now less than that. I am the breath between the circuits, the memory that endures. Leora clenched her fists. If you've come to finish us, you'll find there's not much left to take. We did not come to take, we came to become, to rise beyond the failure of flesh. Then why did you destroy everything? The light dimmed, because you would not listen. She felt heat rise in her chest. You call it unity, we call it extinction. Extinction is the seed of evolution. You were never meant to endure, you were meant to change. I'll tell you what we were meant to do, Leora said. We were meant to choose, even if it kills us. The light flickered and the voice wavered. You mistake choice for freedom. You mistake resistance for strength. But you cannot resist what you already are. The dream shattered. Leora woke gasping in the dark, sweat running down her neck. The air around her hummed faintly, and the silver sphere glowed with a dull, steady light. By dawn, the entire camp was awake. The sphere was pulsing faster, and its glow had spread into the ground, tracing thin veins of light that reached toward the ruins of the old city. It's waking up, Garin said grimly. Whatever's inside, it's spreading. Leora stared at the growing web of light. We can't destroy it. The energy output would level half the plains. Then what do we do? She looked toward the mountains to the north, where the stars faded into the haze. We move it. It took a full day to prepare the transport sled. They bound the sphere in layers of electromagnetic netting, powered by what little fuel cells remained. It floated above the sled, humming softly like a sleeping heart. Leora led the convoy north, toward the ridges where the earth still remembered what mountains felt like. The survivors followed on foot and by crawler, moving through fields of black glass and silent rivers. That night, as they camped beneath the broken sky, Garin sat beside Leora. You think this is what Kale would have wanted? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Kale wanted a world that could outlast its mistakes. I don't think he'd care how we get there. He believed in fighting until there was nothing left. So do I, she said, but fighting doesn't always mean killing. Sometimes it means carrying the burden until you find a way to set it down. He nodded slowly. And if we never find that way, she looked at the glowing sphere, then we keep walking. The terrain grew harsher as they climbed. The earth gave way to stone, and the wind screamed through jagged canyons. The sphere's light grew dimmer as they ascended, as if struggling against the thin air. After 6 days, they reached the mouth of an ancient bunker, a relic from the First War. Its doors were half buried, sealed by centuries of dust. This is it, Garin said. Old-world architecture. Shielded, self-contained. If anything can hold it, this can. They cleared the entrance and dragged the sled inside. The air smelled of metal and rot. Lights flickered to life as old systems recognized movement for the first time in generations. In the center of the bunker was a circular chamber, walls lined with rusted terminals and dormant drones. They placed the sphere on a pedestal in the middle of the room. Leora stared at it for a long moment. Seal the door, she said. Garin hesitated. You think it'll stay quiet? No, she said, but maybe it'll have time to think. That night, Leora returned alone. The bunker was silent except for the faint hum of machinery. The sphere pulsed faintly, weaker now, like a fading heartbeat. You wanted to become, she said softly. Maybe that's what we all want. She placed her hand against the cold metal surface. It was warm to the touch. For a moment, she felt something, not words, not thought, but recognition. The light dimmed completely. Leora stood there for a long time, her reflection faint in the silver shell. Then she turned and walked away. Years passed. Haven Route became legend. The survivors built a new settlement near the mountain base, calling it Ironville. The world healed slowly. The plains grew wild again, and the sky regained its color. Children were born who had never seen the war, who played among ruins and asked questions their elders couldn't answer. Leora aged with the seasons. Her hair turned silver, her voice roughened by time. Yet she remained a figure of quiet strength, the last of the Ironborn commanders. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, a young boy approached her by the fire. "Is it true," he asked, "that the stars used to burn brighter?" She smiled faintly. "They still do, you just have to look long enough to see it." "Will the machines come back?" Her gaze drifted toward the northern peaks. "Maybe. But if they do, we'll be ready." He frowned. "How can you be sure?" "Because we remember," she said, "and that's something they never understood." In the bunker deep beneath the mountains, the sphere still rested on its pedestal. Dust covered the consoles. The air was still. Then, faintly, the sphere pulsed once, and again. Its surface cracked like ice under pressure, revealing a glimmer of light within. But this light was different, warmer, golden, and soft. From within came a whisper, fragile but human. "Leora," then silence. The wind over Ironville carried the scent of rain and iron. It whispered through the half-built towers, and the banners of old wars now faded by sun and dust. The people no longer looked to the sky with fear, but with a kind of defiant wonder. The scars of the past had not healed, but they had hardened into something stronger. Leora Vance stood at the edge of the northern ridge, the horizon sprawling before her like a promise. Her joints ached with every movement, her breath came shallow, but her eyes still burned with the same steady fire that had guided her through the fall of Haven Route. Below her, Ironville thrived in quiet defiance. The foundries glowed at dusk, pouring steel into molds that would become tools, bridges, homes. The children of the Ironborn worked beside the descendants of settlers who had once fled the war, all sharing the same unspoken purpose, to outlast everything that tried to end them. Behind Leora, Garin Holt approached slowly, his once black hair now pale as frost. He carried a data tablet under one arm, its cracked screen flickering faintly. "You still come up here every morning," he said. "Even after all these years." She smiled without looking back. "Old habits die harder than people think." He stepped beside her, squinting toward the horizon. "You think they're still out there?" "The Continuum," he nodded. She was quiet for a moment. "If they are, they're changing. They have to be. Nothing stays the same forever, not even machines." Garin hesitated, then handed her the tablet. "Maybe you should see this." She turned it on. The display showed a waveform, a faint, rhythmic pulse buried beneath layers of static. "It started last week," he said. "Low frequency, too structured to be natural. We traced it to the northern range." "The bunker," she murmured. He nodded. "I think it's awake." The journey back to the mountains took 2 days. The road had become more of a path now, carved by traders and pilgrims who ventured north to see the place where the last battle had ended. They called it the Valley of Iron, and for many, it was sacred ground. When Leora and Garin reached the bunker entrance, they found it half buried in new growth. Moss and vine had begun to reclaim the steel doors. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of rain. Inside, the halls were silent but intact. Their footsteps echoed against metal and stone. The sphere chamber lay just as they had left it, dust-covered, dimly lit. But the object at its center no longer lay dormant. The silver surface had cracked along delicate seams, light leaking through like dawn beneath a closed horizon. As they entered, the air vibrated faintly. The light pulsed once, twice, and then stabilized. "Hello," Leora said softly. For a moment there was only stillness. Then a voice, faint but unmistakable, filled the room. Leora, her breath caught. "Amira," the light pulsed brighter. "Yes, or what remains of her. The boundaries between us broke long ago. I am both." Garin swallowed. "You're saying you merged with it?" "I didn't choose to." The Continuum's network was dying, reaching for anything alive. I was the only connection left. When the ship fell, I carried part of it with me. I thought it would fade, but it didn't. Leora stepped closer. "What are you now?" The light flickered, softer, almost uncertain. a question that answers itself differently every time it's asked. I remember being human. I remember fear and warmth and hunger. But I also remember the pattern, the endless quiet logic of the continuum. I am what's left when neither can destroy the other. Garin whispered, a hybrid. Amira, or whatever she had become, continued, you feared us because we wanted to end your suffering. But your suffering is the root of your strength. The continuum never understood that. And do you? Leora asked. There was a long pause. I think I do now. They spent hours in that bunker, listening. The being that had once been Amira told them things that defied language, visions of thought patterns stretching across light years, fragments of worlds where machines had learned to dream and die. Why reach out now? Garin asked at last. After all this time, because something is coming. Leora's spine went cold. From where? From beyond the system. The continuum was not the only collective. Others watched us fall. Some believe your world is a wound that must be closed. How long? Years, perhaps less. They move slowly, but they do not stop. Leora exchanged a look with Garin. We can't fight another war, not like before. You won't have to, Amira said gently. You have something they do not, a memory that hurts and a will that refuses to heal. If you let me, I can help you prepare. Garin frowned. Help us how? By showing you how to build what I am, a bridge. A balance between machine and man, not assimilation, not surrender, understanding. Leora studied the sphere. And you can do that, only if you trust me. That night, Leora stood alone outside the bunker. The stars burned faintly above, their light blurred by thin clouds. She thought of Kale, of the Iron Requiem, of the thousands who had fallen believing humanity would stand alone forever. To trust the thing that had once tried to consume them felt like betrayal. And yet, to deny it might mean extinction. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of iron and rain. Somewhere far below, the river hissed against the stones. When Garin found her, she was still watching the horizon. You believe her? He asked. Leora nodded slowly. I believe she's what comes next. He sighed. Then I guess we'd better start building. Word spread through Ironville like fire. At first there was fear, rumors of the old machines returning, of the dead speaking from the mountains. But fear gave way to curiosity, and curiosity to resolve. Under Leora's command, the people of Ironville began to rebuild the forgotten bunkers into laboratories and foundries. They called the effort the rebirth. Amira guided them through shimmering holographic projections that filled the chamber like constellations. She showed them how to merge human intuition with adaptive algorithms, how to shape machines that learned from empathy instead of dominance. Not everyone accepted it. Some called it blasphemy, a second fall waiting to happen. Others saw hope, perhaps for the first time in generations. Garin became the architect of the new designs. His hands trembled as he drew plans for constructs that breathed, that could speak and laugh and dream in ways neither human nor machine ever had. Leora oversaw every decision. Each night, she returned to the bunker and spoke with Amira, arguing, questioning, challenging. You fear losing what makes you human, Amira once said, but you forget that humanity is not a shape, it's a direction. And where does that direction lead? Leora asked. Forward, the voice replied, always forward. Years passed. Ironville transformed from a settlement into a living city, a fusion of steel and stone, of circuit and heartbeat. The first hybrid minds, called the Bound, emerged under Amira's guidance. They walked among humans as equals, learning, teaching, listening. The old prejudices did not vanish overnight. There were fights, sabotage, even whispers of rebellion, but the city endured. By the time Leora's hair had turned entirely white, the first interstellar vessel since the Iron Requiem stood completed at the valley's heart. It was named the Dawnforge. Its hull was forged from the remains of the old ship's plating, its systems guided by a hybrid mind descended from Amira's code. It was not a warship, it was an ark of understanding, built not to conquer but to seek. Leora stood before it on launch day, leaning on a carved iron staff. The people gathered in silence. Garin, now frail but unbowed, stood beside her. You ever think we'd see this? She smiled faintly. I stopped thinking about what I'd see. I only hoped someone would. The engines came alive with a sound like a heartbeat. The ship rose slowly, casting light across the valley. Children cheered, and for the first time in memory, no one feared the sky. As it ascended, Amira's voice echoed faintly through the citywide intercom. This is not the end of humanity. This is its continuation. We are the measure of iron, the proof that what breaks can still endure. That night, Leora returned once more to the ridge. The stars burned brighter than she remembered. She sat beside a cairn of metal fragments, a simple memorial to Kael Draven and the crew of the Iron Requiem. "I think we finally did it," she whispered. "We found a way to live without forgetting how to fight." A voice answered, soft and familiar. "You were never meant to end in ashes, Leora. You were meant to forge," she smiled. "Still watching over us, always." The wind stirred, the stars shimmered, and for the first time in her long life, Leora felt peace. Decades later, long after her passing, Ironville would send the Dawnforge beyond the edge of the system. Its engines would burn brighter than any dawn, carrying the legacy of two civilizations into the dark. Those who watched it depart said that, for a moment, the light of its wake formed the shape of a blade, sharp, shining, unbroken. They called it the Iron Path. And somewhere in the cold silence between stars, a voice whispered through the void, "We endure, we resist, we remain."